the best parts of our best relationships and the worst parts of our worst relationships.
Awesome.
And share some fun, terrible, or exciting and wonderful stories on our journey.
Lessons learned.
Yeah.
How people can move on or not.
Or not.
Or identify that they're not. How about that? All right, so how about you go first? Because you had this idea. So what was your best relationship and the things that you really thought that were great that you would probably like to continue or enhance later in your life?
So kind of my first real relationship was kind of like after high school, after college, and like as an adult, right? So she was quite a bit older than me. I think she had just turned 41. And I was maybe 25, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
24, 23.
That's about a 15-year spread.
She was just out of a marriage. So she got married young, and they divorced a couple years earlier. And like she had kids, but she was like an adult, you know, and I'm learning how to be an adult. So it was a very neat...
Then or now or both?
I mean, both. Absolutely.
Okay.
Always. And the thing is, we get older, it's like, why grow up? You know, what is an adult? The benefit of our relationship, like the top 3 things were how well we complemented each other. And the fact of she had really only had one real relationship. And at this point, you know, I had a handful of relationships that I had gone through and just like normal stuff. So, and I also gave her more youthful and excitement, and she gave me wisdom and experience.
Yeah.
So it was really, really good as far as our dynamic.
What was really, I guess you could say, the takeaway from that relationship, other than wisdom and, you know, that you've gained from that, but overall, like, how did it really transform you to the future?
She was a very healthy person. Like, she was very driven. She owned her own company. She had raised good kids. They were still like, I guess she was raising good kids, but she had very strong values. And so I never met her children, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Because she wanted to keep her home life separate than her like dating life.
And you were together for 3 years? Is that what you said?
I think we were together for maybe 2 years back then.
Okay.
Yeah, which was still a long time. Because most
Especially
of my relationships...
for not meeting kids, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And it was just, she had strong boundaries, so she taught me that. And good morals. She was like super exciting, but she was just fun, you know?
So why did the relationship end, I guess?
Why did it end?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Honestly, it was a little weird with the age difference because we would go to parties, right? Like we would go to one of her friends' parties, and they're all her age, and I'm hanging out with her friends' kids.
That's a good point.
Instead of her friends, because they were just more fun.
They're more fun than the boring old men over there.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And so I think she was a little embarrassed about that.
So what it came to my mind was your girlfriend, who's 17 years older than you, and she's having like wine and she's chatting with the gals, and their children are literally having play dates, and you're like playing with the kids in a play date scenario.
Well, they're like high school kids.
Exactly, but still, it's still a play date.
Yeah.
They're playing video games or jumping on trampolines or playing soccer. It doesn't matter, but it's still a play date.
Yeah.
I love it.
Totally happened a couple times.
So funny.
And the flip side too. So she would come to my parties, like we would have a Halloween party, and all my friends are usually my age or younger. Yeah, we're all lit, and she didn't drink that much in general. So
she was Dee.
So it was a little weird there too. So it was socially it was a weird dynamic.
Would you say that she was attracted to your old soul?
That was a compliment, yeah. So she had a young soul, I had an older soul. And so that was like, we met at that middle very well.
Because that's an interesting dynamic. You don't see you're seeing more of it now, where older women are dating younger men. The 17-year spread is pretty significant.
Yeah.
But what would you say to those who are even attracted or interested or checking out dating, older women specifically, dating younger women or men? What am I saying? Even I'm confused. Yeah.
I have actually heard it a lot too, where I'll hear someone, she's in her 40s or 50s, and she's like, this 20-year-old guy was hitting on me. I didn't even give him the time of day. And I'm like, why?
Right.
Like, he's probably attractive. There's a lot that he can gain from that relationship. And there's a lot she'll gain from the relationship too. Especially if, like, when women get older and if they've had a divorce or they've exited relationships or they're not looking
I know
for...
exactly why she's not thinking that. She doesn't want to be a mother to someone she's dating. And that can be in any dynamic.
Yeah.
But especially the age spread, that's exactly where she's going. So that's a great thing to point out and to address. Maybe you have some insight. Because was your girlfriend mothering you, or was she in an actual, like, relationship?
Yeah, we were totally in a relationship. Like,
so
it was very
what made it different? How were you guys setting? But did she have the boundaries? Did you have the boundaries? Both?
I think we both did. I think we had good communication as well. In all relationships, I think there's an unhealthy, not an unhealthy, but a motherly, fatherly, childly mix.
Yeah.
One person is always more parental than the other.
It's codependent in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah. But going into it, especially with that age spread, it's more known it's going to happen.
Right.
And just being okay with it and just knowing what you want out of the relationship. Like, they're not going to get married, typically. Granted, I have seen people who do get married with that much of an age spread. But if, specifically women who get out of a relationship and they're not looking for something serious, I don't see why there would be any reason they wouldn't date someone quite a bit younger than them.
I know exactly the answer to that too. Yeah, it's usually, that idea of judgment. Am I being a responsible adult woman, mother, especially if they're mothers?
Yeah.
And what would my family think, right? It's all those things that tend to put judgment on yourself.
Yeah.
That prevents you from exploring that.
It's all malarkey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tips for people who are going into an interesting dynamic like that, what would you say?
Just enjoy the relationship for what it is and don't worry about the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I've always given the advice to, like, my friends, like, especially when I was in college. I told my female friends, I was like, don't date a guy your age. All us college guys are idiots. Date someone older. Right?
Yeah.
And for guys, in their early 20s, I think it would be great. Try someone older. And vice versa. You go younger when you get older.
I would say tips for that would be, if you're the younger male, really show up and own up as a human. Because a lot of them can go into this being, oh, she's a cougar. She can, basically that, what do they call that? Gold digging kind of feel.
The guy.
Yeah, but it's towards sex and income, right? Rather than just the money piece of it.
Right.
So they, like, really show up in your emotional intelligence and be there, because this is a lady you're dealing with who's gone through some life.
Right.
So, yeah. That's my tip for the younger gentleman.
I think that's accurate, yeah. Because it is respect. You want to be respectful. But I think that's important for all relationships.
Right, but yet so forgotten. Especially when you're young, you just don't really think about those things. You're just thinking, oh, it's fun.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, but for those who've had life, they need that respect.
Yeah. So what about yourself? What was the best part of your best relationship, would you say?
So like your elderly ex-girlfriend.
Elderly. Older.
Well, I don't mean like old. I mean, like, she's just older than you. Okay. Your older girlfriend. I have only had few actual relationships.
Yeah.
And that's kind of by design, because I don't want to have serial relationships. It's just not how I groove.
Right.
And so my last relationship actually was a 5-year relationship. Really, if we break it down, I've had like 3.5 relationships. And so this one was a 5-year, and it was great. He was a wonderful human being, and I still think that today. And what was so great about it, well, let me tell you how we entered the relationship first, which was interesting. So I moved back to Colorado after my husband and I at the time decided to get the divorce. And so I moved back to Colorado. 6 months later, I needed another place to stay because my landlord was selling her house. So I put an ad out there on Craigslist saying, hey, I'm looking for a room to rent near the university area. And so he was the guy that was like, hey, I got a room to rent. I went over, checked out the room. It was all good. It was like, he was great. The house was great. And location was great. And the price was great. So I was like, let's go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started renting, and we became friends pretty quick because we literally lived in the same house. And so we see each other. And then a month later, we actually decided to start dating. Mm-hmm. And it was great after that. We had our issues. We had our problems, like all relationships. But I went from a relationship that was controlling, manipulative, and the family side of his was very controlling and manipulative as well.
Okay.
So it was like slowly entering into a cult type feeling. Mm-hmm. And then it was a lot of stress in that relationship because of his military background and with the medical crisis that we had.
Right.
So I was just like, I'm done. I can honestly take on anything, which is very true. Mm-hmm. But I was like, everything after this is going to be so easy. And in a way it has been.
Yeah.
And so this relationship was easy and it was great. And we had a lot of fun and a lot of great times. And he was supportive of my dreams. That was new.
Oh, okay.
So my ex, he was very into supporting my dreams up front.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to application, he was not.
Right.
And that's where the manipulation and control started really taking place.
I understand that.
And so I was like, okay. So this guy, he was all about supporting my dreams, and I was about supporting his dreams. So it was a great partnership and friendship in that respect.
Okay.
And so I hear a lot of people that talk about, I've been in a marriage for 20 years, and the last 5 years, my spouse has not been supportive of my side hustle.
Yeah.
And I understand that piece, but I also understand what it can be to have a supportive partner. And I was like, there's something so much better out there for you that you can have that. So that was the biggest lesson and experience that I got moving forward was, what does someone who actually supports you do and look like?
So what did that support look like, out of curiosity?
Literally, it was just, he would listen to what I'm going to do, and he'd say, how can I help? Or he would say, well, go for it. I'm here rooting for you. I'll help problem solve for you. Like, he didn't have to financially back me up if he didn't want to. He literally didn't have to do anything, but he was just, I'm here to support you. It's your decision. Let's go for it.
Do you have a specific story of like the most supportive thing? Like one thing?
Well,
yeah. Was like, oh, man, this is great.
I was going to publish a book.
Okay.
And I literally was quitting the roofing business. And this is when we were together. We moved to Denver together for entrepreneurship opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so he was also in the same roofing company as I for a shorter time because he was smarter. But he could catch on to crap much faster than I did at the time. Mm-hmm. So we were both in the same roofing company. He left sooner, and then I was looking to really leave. And then I entered into the speaking world, and I was like, okay, I'm going to enter in the speaking world. I think I'm really good at it. And he's like, yeah, I've seen you speak. You're really good at it. Go for it.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to Vegas. There's this conference, and I'm going to put in my cash, and I'm going to be gone for 3 days. He's like, let me drive you to the airport. Just being there to be a support. That's really where he came in, and it was really helpful. And then I was going to publish a book, which took some financial investment.
Yeah.
And I was freaking out because I'm going to own up to my financial investments. I don't ask for him to pay for it.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'm entering into this financial investment. All I want is for you to be here to make me feel sane. Okay. And he was like, okay, I'm here to help you feel sane. Yeah. And he was there with me through the bankruptcy. He was there with me through the publishing of the book, the getting the book done. He was just a wonderful support.
I do want to reiterate that having someone who is supportive is huge.
It also shows who's going to be committed with you.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, some spouses don't realize that they're not being supportive. Mm-hmm. And I think the communication is really important. And this is something I heard recently. I think it was either Tony Robbins or it was Eric Worre. So someone talking about starting a new business and how do you get your partner on board. And basically, instead of saying, hey, I'm trying this new thing, will you help me? It's saying, hey, this is really important to me. I really want to be successful. And I don't need your help, but I need your support. Uh-huh. Can you be supportive of my dream? Uh-huh. And then reiterating, my dream is to get out of my job and be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of people, especially when they start something new, whether it's a new business or a side hustle or a MLM company or some kind of side project, they don't convey the dream to their partner. They expect their partner to see it.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think that's an important thing, which I imagine you did a really good job of conveying, or either he saw the dream with you, or you were able to convey, like, this is really important to me and I really need to get out of this roofing industry.
Well, I really involved him in what is happening because, at first I called him, and right before I was going to sign this like publisher deal.
Yeah.
And he was like, whoa. And I was like, yeah, so I'm freaking out, but I really want to do it. And he's like, but he saw this as, we're all still young. We can recover from this.
Yeah.
If it falls through. So, again, he was just really supportive. And he was always somebody that, no matter what, bills were going to be paid for. Like, he grew up in like 8 Mile, Detroit, where Eminem was from. No shit.
Okay.
And so he grew up on the streets, and he had to make ends meet no matter what. So when he got into the military, army, it really shaped him into a person that doesn't have to struggle to make rent. So he was able to find whatever he needed to find to make things happen for him.
Okay.
So he wasn't worried about his bills. He wasn't, as long as I could pull my weight, it was fine. And again, that kind of came down to communication. And yeah, there was a couple times where I was like, I can't pay this month's rent. And he's like, it's okay. I have money coming in. I can pay this month's rent. And then like 6 months later, I still can't pay rent. And he was okay with it. But if it became a problem, he would voice it to me.
Right.
And so I would, okay, I'll go get a part-time job. Okay, I'll do this. Okay, I'll do that. Again, yeah, it's that communication piece. But I would walk him through the process of being like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that with the book. And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do that. And hopefully it works out. And he'd be like, okay, how can I support you?
Nice.
So now I think we enter into the worst relationships and how that has not only developed who you are, but also lessons you've learned going on into life, whether that's seeing the red flags early or knowing what you do and don't want. So tell us a little bit about your worst relationship and the lessons you learned from that.
Yeah, and that is really interesting. So we interviewed Tayo just recently, and I really liked what he said. Because he had apparently a pretty terrible ex as well.
Right.
And he says, instead of being like, she was a terrible ex, he's like, she was a really great teacher.
Yeah.
And I really like that. So I've had some really great teachers.
Wonderful way to put that.
Yeah. And because if you think, like, if you go into a relationship with anyone, there's something there. Like it started with something amazing just because we all have our own traumas and we all have our own things to work through. Doesn't make them a bad person per se. Right. There was good in them, which is where the relationship came from. The relationship that was the most unhealthy and probably gave me the most lessons from, I think I do talk about a little bit on one of our previous episodes.
Your narcissist girlfriend.
Yeah. So clinically narcissistic. So I think that term is thrown out a lot. Like, she's such a narcissist. If you haven't been with a clinical narcissist, like, it's so different because they actually live in an alternate reality.
Right. Well, as an actual narcissist, clinical narcissist, how would she, like, explain being in a relationship with someone like that and how it can take you down a rabbit hole?
She could never receive any kind of feedback or criticism. So if she did anything wrong ever, it was never her fault. No matter what, even it's like, hey, you didn't pay this bill, or hey, she crashed my car, right? So she totaled my car, and then she says, well, it's your fault for letting me drive. And it's like, no. And she would like lie about literally everything, and then I would catch her in the lie. And then be like, hey, you lied to me about this specific thing. She'd be like, well, I didn't lie. And that's not true. And here's the story that she would make up on the spot and then completely believe that story. It was crazy to see it happen in real time.
Right.
And so that's when I started researching more about like what narcissism is and how it works, and getting the understanding let me see it happen. And someone who doesn't know that that's what's going on, it makes you feel
as a
crazy.
narcissist, it's hard to become aware of that anyway. If you are a narcissist, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, but so she didn't see she was doing anything wrong, and she so believed that. So it makes the partner who isn't a narcissist feel insane.
Right.
It's like, no, this is wrong. And she would be so like argumentative and insistent, like, no, it's not. You're wrong.
Yeah.
And so someone who's in that relationship, it's really terrible. But what it really let me do is see where these red flags come from. And I can see there's a lot of people with narcissistic tendencies because I think our culture is just really perpetuating that. That makes it really easy to slip into kind of narcissism.
Codependency also has bouts of narcissism in it as well.
I believe that, yeah.
And obviously, we talked about codependency a little bit, but like it's somewhere around 70% of the entire United States population is codependent in some way or another.
Yeah.
So narcissism is definitely like in those. So I would total fake numbers here, but let's say 50% of the population in the United States has some bouts of narcissism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with social media, with the way we need to present ourselves to the world, we have to have it.
Instagram, total narcissist platform.
Completely.
And also the most insecure platform too.
Yeah.
This is why it's 50%.
And there's good to it too, right? A lot of the best artists and performers and athletes out there have either extreme or some sort of narcissistic tendencies.
Right.
But it makes them the best at what they do. Because they're like, I'm the best at what I do.
Kanye West. Prime example.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an interview with him and Joe Rogan talking about his going for presidency and among other things.
Yeah.
It actually made me like Kanye quite a bit better.
Really?
It's a really interesting conversation. So you guys should look it up if you haven't seen it.
I don't really have opinions of Kanye. I just know he's known for narcissism or bipolar.
Yeah, and he's got
tendencies.
All kinds of issues. But that's the fuel that makes him a great artist. Like it or hate it.
So if you are an artist, you can be a narcissist, bipolar, and it's accepted. But
just be really good at something.
You will be alone forever.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe. And I hear that a lot about narcissism in all sorts of different realms, especially TikTok recently. I don't know why, but these videos every now and then pop up about these people who really help others get out of narcissist relationships or recover from narcissist relationships specifically because it's such a big problem.
Yeah.
Whether it is your partner, spouse, or even a parent. I know people who have grown up with full-on narcissist mothers specifically.
I'm fairly certain.
That are like, whoa. It's amazing what you learn knowing that you were being manipulated by a narcissist and what it has really done to you.
Yeah.
And it's more popular than I think we give it credit for.
Absolutely. But I think it's also overused in a way that like people don't really understand what that true clinical narcissism is.
Yeah.
So that it's a give and take. Much like depression, I think. Like people overuse the word depression where there's clinical depression and like
acute depression,
which we talked about.
Which we talked about in one of our episodes about depression.
Yeah. That was probably the worst relationship that taught me the most. So what about yourself? What's kind of like the worst parts of your worst relationship?
So prior to my best relationship, I was coming out of a marriage. And that marriage was what I would consider the best teaching moment of my life.
Yeah. Very educational.
Very educational. I'll tell you what, there was a lot crammed in to just a few years of that relationship. And a lot of it was outside of us too. So basically, the things I've learned, let's try and keep it focused because there's a lot. The things that I learned from it is the codependency, is what narcissists and bipolars can be, is what narcissist mothers could be, is a lot of what damage that can come from the church.
Okay.
And the military. It's just big old cocktail of shit.
Yeah, let's just hate on all of America's institutions here.
It's a lot in one. And
this is how the IDK WTF podcast got canceled.
No shit. How I don't know what the fuck I'm doing was that entire relationship. To the point where I thought I was insane.
Yeah. So
entering the relationship, there was a lot of romanticism around a lot of things on both parties.
Right.
So we knew each other for quite a few years beforehand. He was younger than me, about a year and a half younger than I.
Okay.
And I was going to college, and he was going to the Marine Corps. And we decided we were going to start dating, and if he entered the Marine Corps, we would continue the relationship knowing he'd be gone. And I'd be fine. Because knowing me now, I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's totally fine. You can go away. And so he went into boot camp. And, I was very involved with his family. Their family is very intimate in that they don't have a lot of, I guess you could say, outsiders involved.
Okay.
This becomes a thing. But
and that's a sign also that there's something going on.
Exactly. So there's boundaries, and then there's just like closed doors.
Yeah.
So I was well accepted into the family and into the relationship. And when he got out of boot camp, we got engaged. So it was about a 1.5 year engagement. And then he went into Afghanistan as a machine gunner. So he was, infantry, front lines, and he was very good at his job. Like, he was a very exceptional Marine.
Okay.
And that shows on his record. He went to Afghanistan. This was in 2010. And no Marine had seen as much action until then from the Vietnam War. So
from the Vietnam War
till then, no Marine had seen so much action.
Okay.
So he did a lot of things for our country and for our purpose of being in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And so when he came back, unfortunately, a lot of things changed, as anyone would with a deployment.
Right.
And we were technically married at this point. One of those what they call a war bride. You get married before you ship off.
Yeah.
And then you come back and have your party. So we did that.
Yeah.
And when he came back, of course, there's some things that really were red flags. But it was like, we'll figure this out. We probably need to do some counseling and stuff because he's changed. I'm somewhat the same. And we need to figure out this new way of living. So I moved onto base into California, 29 Palms, which is, we also have a joke. It's called 29 Stumps. It's the armpit of America. Just put it that way. I hope it's changed since, but I doubt it. It's a miserable little desert town with nothing to do, and it's like 120 degrees outside.
Okay. Stumps because trees don't grow?
We call it 29 Stumps because it's just a stupid place to be.
Okay.
Drugs run rampant, and there's nothing literally to do unless you have kids. And I did not have kids. We weren't planning on having kids for at least a few years.
Yeah.
So most of the Marine wives were a lot younger than me. I was 22, and they were all 18, with a child or two on the way.
That's crazy.
Go
ahead.
It's hard to relate. It's just a very common thing in the military. Especially in infantries. So, so I'm over there. And, he was very supportive of my dreams. I was going to be an archaeologist. I was going to get my master's. Once he was done, with his 4 years, I was going to get my master's. And then I was going to be working a lot in Europe. And that had not changed. But his idea of life after his deployment had changed. And he got very sick from his deployment, unfortunately. So I became a caregiver. He wasn't able to deploy, which was like crashing his dreams.
Yeah,
which is understandable.
His identity at this point.
His identity of being a Marine. He was very good at it. It's like going into a job in anything and you're one of the best, and then all of a sudden you're cut off because you're sick.
Yeah.
And especially for someone who's physical and moving, it's very hard to do that when you can't.
Yes.
So he became very angry, and it became very scary.
Okay.
And he's a very different person today. And we separated as friends in the end. But the lessons I learned was watch the red flags so early, because what happens on day one will happen on day end, whatever you want to call it. And so, or I guess you say ground zero in a way.
Yeah.
But it became a war zone inside the house, at the hospital, in the Marine Corps. And so it was just so much crap going on all at once. And then the family got involved.
Okay.
And this is where the narcissistic mother comes in.
Okay.
This is the almost cultish, intimate family comes in. And they needed a scapegoat to blame on what was going on. And so I became that scapegoat.
And this is actually something I hear kind of often, especially with that narcissistic mother.
Yes.
When
the spouse becomes the problem.
Yeah. When you were early in the relationship, did you and his mom get along, or did you feel...
We love Anastasia. Anastasia's so great.
Was it like, how girls like pretend to like each other and they have that like front and they're like, oh, I love this girl. Did it feel like a fake like, or was it...
As long as he was happy, they were happy. when he had stress, when he had anger, when he had issues, it was my fault.
Even early on?
No. This was when he started to, this is after boot camp. This is when you're engaged.
So I'm asking, like, before boot camp, was there any issues with the mom or family?
No.
Okay.
There really wasn't.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpackage with this story.
Yeah.
But basically what came in was family blamed me, and he actually defended me and said, no, she's basically saved my life, because I was running to the emergency room almost twice a week.
Right.
Because it was literally like, almost, it felt like life or death at that point. We have no answers for that. And so it just became a scapegoat in a sense. And I understand on their end, they are just worried, they're stressed, and they don't know what to do with this energy.
Yeah.
So they find something that's outside of everything that they can kind of put a blame on. And a lot of it was on me.
Okay.
And so he defended me. And if he had not at that point, I would have been gone. I'd be like, see ya.
Yeah.
But he did. And so I stayed and continued to care for him. And he had a switch. He flipped from this angry, upset, manipulative control freak to someone who was like, oh, you are really helping me. Okay. And I need to help you help me, or this isn't going to work. Okay. And so he really had kind of like a life or death kind of decision. And so it became a good relationship. It wasn't a marriage, but it was a friendship.
So after you had broken up?
No, this is while he was going through recovery from his injuries. Okay. So we were living in San Diego at the hospital at that time. And so
still married, he was angry. Then he had like an epiphany and like, oh no, I need her.
Well, he thought he was on his deathbed. So he had an epiphany and he was like, yeah, I need to change. Okay. And so that really changed a lot of things, but there was a lot to heal from. And I was ostracized from the family, and I was okay with that.
So he was still like, no, I need you. And then family was like, it's her fault that he's sick, which is absurd. Yeah. And I mean, what would have been more helpful for everyone is if they had partnered with you. Yeah. And really been another pillar of support for you. And
there's a lot of backstory with them as to why they wouldn't do that with me, because of another child and their issues with their spouse. That was all happening at once, right? It was just this cocktail storm that happened, and nobody knew how to navigate it. And of course, we couldn't get therapy for it. Right. So, and so moving forward, he got discharged. We go to Florida, and we start to have some kind of life. And I start diving into researching and getting into the classical archaeology mode again. And then we just had to have a heart to heart. And beforehand, he wasn't supportive of my education at all. Okay. Because I was trying to continue some education. This was before he had the really downhill of the health crisis. Yeah. And I had to try and like float the education to at least pass.
Because he wanted you to be a housewife, or why?
Basically, he wanted me to turn into his mom.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, he was like, no, you're not my mom. No. So, but then it was like, we're all healing. We're getting back into a life mode. And so I started looking into schools, even in the area, to get my master's in classical archaeology. And we both had, a conversation, and it was just like, this isn't going to work anymore. He couldn't support my dreams because of what he wanted his life to be like. And I couldn't support his dreams, or I could support his dreams, but I would have to do mine as well. And he wasn't able to do that. Right. So in the beginning of our relationship, he was like, yeah, let's have this romantic notion that I'm going to support you, and we can do this, we can do that. It's all good. Then we get married and shit hits the fan, and he's like, no, you have to be here. You have to take care of me. You have to do this. You have controlling. And then in the end, he was just like, we need to have different ways of doing things.
Yeah, that's hard, because it is a young age. I personally probably went through more personal development changes from the age of 20 to 25 than any other point in my life.
Same.
And so he's in war at that point. And that's a significant...
he went to war before he was 21.
Yeah. And that's it's so crazy to me when you say that. Like, we know it as kind of standard. Like, our 18-year-olds get recruited, they go to the military, get married. But to think of like 18-year-olds, like especially in a marriage with 2 kids, going to kill people. Yeah. I don't feel that is right. Now that I'm older and I see like who I was at age 18 and who I am now, Like, it's so cognitively destructive.
Well, if you think about it in a strategic form,
Mm-hmm.
you recruit those who don't know any better
Mm-hmm.
before they know better.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it's a great way to not say mind wash, but a great way to train you to be a good soldier. And in a sense, it's a type of mind washing, but it's like we got to get you to be trained to be a good soldier and take orders. When you're 40 years old, you really want to take orders from people,
Hell no.
Exactly.
I can't even have a manager.
It's like you got to train them early. And yeah, but
Crazy.
yeah, I remember there was a couple Marines that were more closer. Actually, they were older than me, and they went into the Marine Corps later in life. And you could just tell that they were able to relate to these 18-year-olds, but they were like, I've been drinking for 6 years, like at the same time I can't relate to you.
Right.
So it's just but they were very much more in the wiser of how life works.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So that was the worst relationship, but greatest teaching moment of all time, and I have no resentment to them at all. No one in their area. He's off, he's married, he's got like 5 kids now. Okay. And he's living life. Like,
so that's more the life that he wanted.
And here's the key. Even if you haven't caught the red flags early, the point to where you do catch the red flags and this needs to end, take the time to say, well, this needs to end, because he would not have 4 kids and a wife that he loves and doing all those things now.
Yeah.
And I would not be doing what I am doing today.
Right.
And so it's okay to separate, even if you're freaking married and have that contract.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it takes work. It takes self-awareness, and it takes really good communication. And I think a lot of people separate without that communication and self-awareness. And I think a lot of people stay together without that self-awareness and communication. Yeah. Both in very unhealthy ways.
Because a lot of people tend to stay in a relationship because they see the potential.
Because they're working towards a common goal?
No, because they think they can.
They think they can.
They haven't started or getting towards it or making any progress. So it's that, potential can be such a dangerous word.
Yes.
And it's, again, being aware of, are you even moving together, or are you moving against each other?
And I want to highlight that because I've heard a friend of mine recently say that. And it's the potential of the partner. Like, if you see the potential in the partner, but that's not what they want, then you're working against each other. So it's like, no, I swear she can do this and that, and she's going to be the perfect whatever. Or she's like, he is going to be the perfect man. He's going to do these great things, and he's going to do this. But when there's no communication about that, and like, hey, does that potential line up with your partner's goals? Yeah. I see so many conflicts because someone sees potential and the other person doesn't want that. And then it's...
And there's something that I refer to this guy all the time because I think he's great, Matthew Hussey, with relationships. He said something that really made a lot of sense. He said, instead of just looking for the connection, which is important, he's like, look for compatibility. Yeah. Because you can have the strongest connection in the entire world, but if one wants to go to war in Afghanistan and one wants to dig out mummies in, like, the Mediterranean, you're not going to be seeing each other. Right. If you're someone who wants to be with each other instead of just talking on the phone. Maybe that's a great friendship, but that's not going to be a great actual, like, partnership. Exactly. Especially if you're looking for kids and the whole Mr. Jones, Mrs. Jones kind of scenario.
Yeah. And compatibility changes,
Oh, yes.
With my last relationship, we were together about 3 years, and it was a great 2.5 years, but that last half a year got terrible because her priorities changed because her kids were getting older, but she didn't communicate those changes. And I don't think she was aware enough that those changes were happening. Right. So where we had great connection, we had a great first couple of years, better than probably pretty much any relationship I've had or she's had, because things changed and my goal was very different than her goal at that point. We became completely incompatible, despite a strong connection.
I think a lot of people, because I've actually been married to one who was not okay with those changes. Right. Right. And entering any relationship, really having no expectations of how long this relationship will be is very important, I feel.
I agree.
Because, yeah, there's the dream of marrying someone and being with them for all of time, and that could happen.
Yeah.
But to have that expectation can lead to a lot of toxic red flags that you're not paying attention to or addressing, or maybe you are addressing.
Yeah.
But it's just like this interesting romanticism that I totally blame a lot of Hollywood on.
Yeah.
But it's this romanticism of what relationships are, where they can go, and how they should be.
Yeah.
Compared to how it actually works.
Right.
In reality.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mm.
So I'm going to ask you first. What is your number one takeaway from today's conversation?
I think actually it's just what I just said.
Yeah, I know.
Which is like the expectations. I was like, wait a minute, that was great advice.
Yeah.
It's really managing the expectations and communicating those expectations, that the end goal isn't about longevity. I honestly think it's about high quality.
Agreed. Yeah.
What about you?
So my number one takeaway is going to be that a relationship ending isn't a bad thing. As long as it's communicated appropriately and it's discussed. And things changing is fine. A lot of people I think are really scared of change, and they're scared of being alone, and there's a lot of fear of not being able to find someone else, or that maybe they're not good enough. And I think diving into all of that, especially when you're with a partner who can support you and you can support your partner, finding all these. So if you can really work with your partner to discover who you are as a person and who they are as a person, and being okay with whatever those results are, I think is a really healthy relationship.
So no expectations.
So having no expectations, but again, curiosity about yourself and your partner.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
No expectations, but curiosity.
Yeah.
There's the takeaway of the day.
Boom.
Well, this has been an awesome and interesting episode of I Don't Know What the Fuck I'm Doing podcast. Thanks for listening. And hey, click subscribe, like, share with a friend if you like this. Also, check out the links in the show notes below or in the description. Here at Thrive Workplace Centennial, recording our podcast as usual. And David's doing his little gun maneuver.
I'm trying to narrate with my hands what you're saying.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Links, subscribe, like.
All those things. He's like, I have no idea where they're located either.
Somewhere.
Just pointing at random objects in the frame. We'll see you next time on the next episode of I Don't Know What the Fuck I'm Doing podcast.
And you, whoever you are my favorite person.